I need to tell someone this story because it's been eating me alive, and honestly, you seem like someone who's heard it all. This happened to me about 3 years ago, and it completely changed my life in ways I never could have imagined. I'm talking about a transformation so radical that sometimes I look in the mirror and wonder if I'm even the same person who walked into my daughter's house that day. So picture this. It was my daughter Emma's 45th birthday, right? And I'm standing at her front door with this gorgeous cake I'd special ordered from her favorite bakery downtown. This wasn't just any cake, mind you. I'd called them 3 days in advance, described exactly what Emma loved as a child. Chocolate layers with fresh strawberries between each tier. The same combination I used to make for her when she was little and would climb onto the kitchen counter to help me bake. Cost me $200, but hey, she's my only kid, you know? Nothing's too expensive for your child, or at least that's what I thought back then. I'm standing there with the biggest smile on my face, my heart racing with excitement like a kid on Christmas morning, expecting her to light up like she used to when she was little and I'd surprise her with something special. But man, when she opened that door, the look she gave me. It wasn't just annoyance. It was pure disgust, like I was some door-to-door salesman interrupting the most important moment of her life. Her eyes didn't even register the beautiful cake in my hands, didn't notice that I'd dressed up in my best outfit, didn't see the love radiating from every fiber of my being. "Oh great, it's you," she says, not even looking me in the eye, already turning away like my presence was contaminating her doorway. Can you believe that? Her own mother showing up with a birthday cake that cost more than most people spend on groceries in a week. And that's the greeting I get. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," I say, holding out this beautiful cake with all the candles perfectly arranged. I'd spent 20 minutes getting them just right, making sure they spelled out Happy 45th in her favorite colors. "I got your favorite chocolate with strawberries. Just like when you were a kid and we'd bake together every Sunday afternoon." You'd think that memory, that connection to our past, would at least get a smile, right? Maybe a little softness in her eyes. Emma just sighs like my being there is this massive burden she has to deal with. This inconvenience that's ruining her perfect day. "Mom, we need to talk," she says in this ice-cold voice that could freeze hell over. And she lets me in without even a thank you for the cake, without acknowledging the effort, the money, the love that went into this gesture. Now here's the thing you need to understand about this house we're sitting in. And I want you to really understand this because it becomes important later. I paid for it. Well, not the whole thing, but I gave them $50,000 for the down payment. 50 grand that I pulled straight from my life savings. Money I'd saved penny by penny working double shifts as a nurse for 40 years. We're talking about money I'd accumulated by skipping meals to save a few dollars, by working Christmas and New Year's shifts when other nurses wanted to be with their families, by taking on the worst assignments because they paid overtime. I'd saved this money thinking it would be my retirement cushion, my security blanket for old age. But when Emma and Jake were looking at houses, when they found this beautiful place in the suburbs with a big yard and the good school district, and they looked so disappointed when the realtor told them they needed more for the down payment, what was I supposed to do? Let my daughter's dreams crumble. Let my grandchildren grow up in some tiny apartment when I had the power to give them a real home. That's what you do for your kids, right? You sacrifice your future for theirs. So we sit down in her beautiful living room. This room I'd helped design, where I'd spent countless hours babysitting the twins, where I'd held Emma when she cried about Jake's job troubles, where we'd shared so many moments that I thought meant something. The afternoon light was streaming through those expensive curtains I'd bought her for Christmas 2 years ago, highlighting the family photos on the mantel. Photos that I'd taken, memories I'd helped create and preserve. Emma starts talking, and there's something in her voice that makes my blood run cold, something I'd never heard before in all my years as her mother. "You know what, Mom," she says, and each word is like a dagger being slowly twisted in my chest. "I've been thinking about my birthday, about presents, about what would really make me happy this year." I'm nodding along like an idiot, thinking she's about to ask for some expensive gift, maybe that European vacation she'd been hinting about for months, or that new car she'd mentioned when her old one started having problems. My mind is already racing, calculating how much I could pull from my savings, what I could sell, how I could make her dreams come true like I always had. "Of course, honey, tell me what you want," I say, my voice full of that eager-to-please tone that had become my default with her over the years. "A vacation." That new car you mentioned. Some jewelry. Maybe we could plan a family trip. Take the twins somewhere special. I'm ready to say yes to anything, like always, like I had been for 45 years of her life. But then she looks me straight in the eye, and what I see there. Driver, I'm telling you, it's pure hatred. Not annoyance, not frustration, not even anger, pure, undiluted hatred, like I was her worst enemy instead of the woman who'd given birth to her. The one thing I'd love most as a birthday present, she says, taking her sweet time with each word, savoring them like fine wine, is for you to just die. I swear to you, driver, the world just stopped spinning on its axis. Time froze like in those movies where everything goes into slow motion. I felt like someone had reached into my chest and ripped my heart out with their bare hands, then stomped on it while I watched. The room started spinning, my vision blurred, and for a moment I thought I might actually collapse right there on her expensive carpet. Carpet I'd helped pay for when they were redecorating. My own daughter, the child I carried for 9 months, feeling every kick and hiccup, the baby I'd held against my chest and promised to love forever, the little girl I'd rocked to sleep every night while singing lullabies, the teenager I'd supported through every heartbreak and disappointment, the young woman I'd guided through college and career choices and relationship troubles, had just wished for my death as a birthday gift. Not just wished it silently, but said it out loud, deliberately, with full intention to hurt me as deeply as possible. What did you just say? I whispered, and I could feel the tears starting to well up, my voice cracking like I was 13 years old again. My hands started trembling so badly I almost dropped that beautiful cake, and I had to grip it tighter just to keep it from falling to the floor. You heard me perfectly, she says, cold as ice, colder than a January morning in Alaska. I'm tired of you, Mom. Tired of your constant calls asking how I'm doing, tired of your surprise visits where you bring groceries and gifts, tired of you always being here bothering me when I'm trying to live my life. My life would be so much easier and happier if you would just disappear forever. My hands started shaking uncontrollably, and I had to sit down before my legs gave out completely. 72 years I'd been alive, and in all those decades of existence, through deaths of parents, divorce, job losses, health scares, I never thought I'd hear those words from my own child. This was worse than when my husband died, worse than when I got my cancer diagnosis 5 years ago, worse than any physical pain I'd ever endured. Emma, I managed to say through my sobs, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm your mother. I've given you everything. I've sacrificed everything I had, everything I was, everything I could have been for you. Exactly, she interrupts, jumping up from the couch like she'd been waiting for this moment, like she'd been rehearsing this speech. That's exactly why you're suffocating me. I can't breathe with your constant presence in my life. Every time my phone rings and I see your name, my stomach knots up because I know you want something. My time, my attention, my emotional energy. I need freedom. I need space. I need you to let me live my life without your constant drama and your endless emotional needs. I'm sitting there holding this $200 cake that now felt like a mockery, watching the candles start to melt and drip wax onto the beautiful frosting, and all my dreams for that day. The hugs, the laughter, maybe a nice family dinner where we talk about old times, maybe the twins running up to hug their grandmother. It all just vanished like smoke in the wind. The future I'd imagined, the relationship I thought we had, the love I thought was mutual, all of it crumbling in real time. But honey, I tried one more time, my voice pleading now, desperate to reach some part of the daughter I thought I knew. I just want to be close to you, to be part of your life and the twins' lives. You're all I have left in this world. After your father died, after I lost my sister, after all my friends moved away or passed on, you and the kids are my whole world. And that's exactly the problem. She snaps back, crossing her arms and looking at me like I was some kind of parasite. The fact that I'm all you have. That's not my responsibility, Mom. I didn't ask to be your entire reason for living. Go get a life of your own and leave me alone to live mine. Each word was like a physical blow. I got up from that couch on trembling legs that felt like they might collapse under me, still carrying that stupid cake that now felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, like it was made of concrete instead of flour and sugar. I can't believe you're saying this to me, I whispered. After everything I've done for you, after everything I've sacrificed, after all the times I've been there when you needed me. She actually laughed, this bitter, sarcastic laugh that I'd never heard from her before, a sound so cruel it seemed to echo off the walls. Everything you've done. Mom, everything you've done has been for your own benefit, to make yourself feel needed and important, to have control over my life and my family. But I'm not a little girl anymore who needs mommy to fix everything and make everything better. I walked toward that door feeling like each step was aging me years, like I was walking through quicksand that was pulling me down with every movement. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst, and I could barely see through the tears that were now flowing freely. At the threshold I turned back one last time, hoping against hope to see some regret in her eyes, some sign of the sweet little girl she used to be, the child who would run to me when she was scared and tell me I was the best mommy in the world. But all I saw was impatience. Pure, undisguised impatience for me to leave so she could finally celebrate her birthday without the burden of my existence weighing her down. "Happy birthday, Emma," I whispered, my voice barely audible, and I walked out of that house, closing the door behind me with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in my ears. I had no idea it would be the last time I'd ever enter that house as the mother who had sacrificed everything for her ungrateful daughter. I drove home to my tiny apartment with shaking hands and a shattered heart, having to pull over twice because I was crying so hard I couldn't see the road clearly. That beautiful cake ended up in the trash can by my kitchen, the melted candles like tears that wouldn't stop falling, the perfect frosting now ruined beyond repair. I sat on my old couch, the same couch where I'd nursed Emma as a baby, where I'd read her bedtime stories for years, where I'd helped her with homework, where I'd held her when she cried over boy troubles, where I'd cried tears of happiness every time she achieved something new, and I just completely broke down. How did I get here? How did I go from being the center of my daughter's world to being someone she literally wished was dead? How could my own daughter, the child I'd carried under my heart, wish me dead with such coldness, such calculation, such complete lack of remorse? I started remembering everything, and I mean absolutely everything I'd done for her over 45 years. The memories came flooding back like a tsunami of generosity and sacrifice that now felt completely meaningless. When she was 3 years old and got pneumonia, I worked triple shifts at the hospital to pay for her medicine. $1,200 in specialized antibiotics that my insurance wouldn't cover because they were considered experimental. I had to sell my late mother's jewelry, pieces that had been in our family for generations, just to get that money. I still remember sitting in that hospital room for 3 days straight, holding her little hand while she struggled to breathe, praying to every god I could think of to save my baby. When she turned 16 and wanted to go to prom, when all her friends were getting these expensive dresses and she looked so sad because we couldn't afford one, I worked weekends for 4 months straight to buy her that $800 pink gown that made her look like a princess. I picked up every extra shift available, worked holidays, worked nights, destroyed my sleep schedule and my health, but it was worth it when I saw how her eyes sparkled when she tried it on. "Thank you, Mom, you're the best mother in the world," she had said, hugging me so tight I could barely breathe, and I thought that moment would last forever. College. When she decided to change majors for the 3rd time, going from business to art to psychology and finally to education, I paid every semester without a single complaint. $42,000 total over 6 years because she couldn't make up her mind about what she wanted to study. I took out a second mortgage on my house to do it, putting my own financial security at risk. "Don't worry, sweetheart," I'd tell her every time she called crying about being confused about her future. "Your education is the most important thing. We'll figure it out together." Her wedding. I organized and paid for the entire thing, $35,000 so she could have her fairy tale wedding. The fanciest ballroom in the city, the most beautiful flowers money could buy, a 7-course dinner that cost more per plate than I usually spent on groceries in a month. She chose everything without worrying about price because she knew I was there, signing check after check with a smile on my face. "I want my princess to have everything." "Perfect," I told her as I watched my savings account shrink with each payment. And then came the house. The very house where she'd just humiliated me beyond belief. When Emma and Jake decided they wanted to buy their first place, when they found this beautiful property in the suburbs with a big backyard and the good school district, I didn't hesitate for even a second. "Don't worry about the down payment," I told them. "I'll handle it. $150,000 from my retirement savings, Money I'd been carefully accumulating for decades, thinking it would keep me secure in my old age. But seeing their faces light up when I told them I'd cover it, seeing Emma cry tears of joy and call me the best mother in the world, it felt like the best investment I'd ever made. But the sacrifices didn't stop there. When the twins were born 5 years ago, guess who became the unpaid, round-the-clock babysitter? Every date night Emma and Jake wanted, every weekend getaway, every time they had plans and needed someone reliable to watch the kids, there I was with my arms open wide. Not charging a single penny, not asking for anything in return except the joy of spending time with my grandchildren and helping my daughter maintain her social life and her marriage. When Jake lost his job last year, when they were facing foreclosure and didn't know how they'd pay the mortgage, who stepped in without being asked? Me. $16,000 from my pension over 8 months, which meant I was eating rice and beans for weeks at a time just to stretch my own budget. I'd lost weight I couldn't afford to lose, but I told myself it was worth it to keep my family's home secure. And when the twins needed braces, another $4,000 that I covered without blinking an eye. When Emma's car broke down, $2,000 for repairs. When they wanted to remodel the kitchen, I contributed another $5,000. Every birthday, every Christmas, every special occasion, I was there with expensive gifts that I really couldn't afford. So I got up from that couch feeling like I was moving through molasses and went to my desk where I keep all the receipts. Yeah, I kept everything not because I didn't trust them, but because it made me proud to remember all I'd been able to do for them despite my limited income. Boxes and boxes of proof of every penny I'd spent, every sacrifice I'd made, every time I'd chosen their happiness over my own financial security. I started adding it up, and let me tell you, driver, it was absolutely devastating. Raising Emma from birth to independence. Approximately $200,000. College tuition and expenses. $42,000. The fairy tale wedding. $35,000. House down payment. $150,000. Mortgage payments during Jake's unemployment. $16,000. Twins braces and dental care. $4,000. Car repairs, kitchen remodel, and various home improvements I'd helped with. Another $8,000. Birthday and Christmas gifts over all those years, conservatively estimated. At least $15,000 more. The total was staggering. Over $470,000. Almost $500,000 that I'd invested in my daughter's happiness, in her comfort, in her dreams, just to hear that her greatest wish was for me to die on her birthday. The tears falling onto those papers blurred the ink, but the numbers were burned into my brain forever. You know what really gets me? If I'd put that money in a simple savings account with compound interest instead of spending it on my daughter's endless needs and wants, I'd have over $600,000 today. I could be living in a beautiful house instead of this cramped apartment, traveling the world, enjoying a comfortable retirement with dignity instead of counting pennies and worrying about how I'd pay my bills each month. But no, I chose to invest in love. I chose to believe that every dollar spent on my daughter was an investment in our relationship, that every sacrifice was worth it because someday I'd have a daughter who loved me and would take care of me in my old age, who would visit me regularly and include me in her family's life. What a complete fool I was. I picked up the phone and dialed her number with shaking fingers, needing to hear her voice one more time, needing to confirm she really meant those horrible words, hoping maybe she'd had time to think and regret what she'd said. "What do you want now, Mom?" she answered after 5 rings, her voice dripping with annoyance like I was some telemarketer interrupting her dinner. "Emma, I need to know if you really meant what you said to me today," I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, trembling with hope and fear. "Of course I meant it," she replied without even a microsecond of hesitation, without any remorse in her voice. "Mom, it's time you finally understand that I need space in my life. Your obsession with me and my family isn't healthy for any of us." "Obsession," I repeated, the word hitting me like a physical blow. "You call a mother's love for her only child obsession?" "Yes, exactly that. And I hope after today you finally get the message loud and clear. I need you to respect my boundaries and let me live my life without your constant interference and emotional demands." I hung up that phone without saying goodbye, my hands shaking so badly I could barely press the button. There was no misunderstanding, No heat-of-the-moment outburst that she might take back later. My daughter truly, genuinely believed that my love was a burden she needed to get rid of, that my presence in her life was a problem that needed to be solved permanently. That night, I couldn't sleep a wink. I lay awake staring at the ceiling until sunrise, remembering every beautiful moment we'd shared over the years. Every hug that lasted a little longer than necessary. Every "I love you, Mom" that had come from her lips. Every time she'd called me when she needed advice or comfort or just someone to talk to. Had it all been a lie? Or had I somehow failed as a mother and raised a daughter who had become so selfish, so narcissistic, that she couldn't see beyond her own needs and wants? At 3 o'clock in the morning, something fundamental changed inside of me. The crushing sadness that had been weighing me down like an anchor began to transform into something different, something more powerful: anger, indignation, and this crystal-clear understanding that I had been used, manipulated, taken advantage of, and discarded like a piece of trash. My daughter wanted me to die. Well, maybe it was time to give her exactly what she asked for. Just not in the way she expected. The next morning, I woke up with this mental clarity I hadn't experienced in years, like someone had finally turned on the lights in a room where I'd been stumbling around in darkness. The overwhelming sadness had crystallized into pure determination. If Emma wanted me to disappear from her life, I would grant her that wish. But I was going to do it on my terms, in my way. And she was going to learn exactly what it meant to lose me and everything I brought to her comfortable little world. I put on my best outfit. A navy blue dress I'd bought for her wedding but rarely wore because I was always saving money for her family's needs, and went out with a very specific purpose. I felt like a woman on a mission, and for the first time in decades, that mission was about me and my own well-being. First stop: the bank where I had maintained a joint account with Emma for house emergencies and unexpected expenses. This account had $20,000 that I'd deposited over the past 2 years, money I'd saved specifically for their families, just in case moments. If the furnace broke, if one of the twins got sick, if Jake's car needed major repairs. Money that was supposed to be their safety net, funded entirely by my sacrifices. "Good morning, Mrs. Martinez." The bank manager greeted me with a warm smile. He'd known me for 15 years and had processed countless transactions where I was helping my daughter's family. "How can I help you today?" "I want to close joint account number 45872891, I said with a smile that he probably interpreted as my usual friendly demeanor, but was actually the first taste of the revenge I was about to serve. "Are you sure, Mrs. Martinez? That account has a substantial balance of $20,000, he warned, checking his computer screen with concern. "Completely sure. I want to transfer every single penny to my personal account," I replied, signing the paperwork with a steady hand that surprised even me. Watching those $20,000 flow back into my personal account gave me a satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. It was like reclaiming a piece of myself that I'd given away. But this was just the appetizer. The main course was coming. Next stop, the mortgage loan office. During Jake's unemployment period, I'd co-signed their mortgage to help them avoid foreclosure. At the time, it seemed like the loving thing to do, the motherly thing to do. What I didn't fully understand then was that being a co-signer gave me certain rights and protections, not just obligations. "Mrs. Martinez." The loan officer greeted me, a professional woman named Ms. Williams who'd handled the paperwork when I'd helped save their house. "What brings you here today?" "I need to review the mortgage contract where I'm listed as co-signer," I explained calmly. "I want to understand exactly what my rights and obligations are under the current circumstances." As she pulled up the documents, I remembered that day I'd signed those papers. Emma had tears streaming down her face with gratitude. "Thank you, Mom. I don't know what we'd do without you. You're literally saving our home, our family. You're our guardian angel," she'd said, hugging me like I was her hero. "Here are the documents," Ms. Williams said, placing a thick folder in front of me. "As a co-signer, you're responsible for payments if the primary borrowers default, but you also have the right to reclaim the property if you believe the borrowers are unable to fulfill their obligations long-term." "Interesting," I said, studying the contract carefully. "What would constitute grounds for exercising those rights?" "Well, repeated unemployment, inability to make consistent payments, or any indication that the borrowers lack the financial stability to maintain the mortgage long term. I see here that you covered 8 months of payments last year, which actually provides strong evidence that the primary borrowers have ongoing financial instability. Perfect. And Emma had mentioned just last week that Jake had lost his job again. Information she'd shared casually, not realizing she was handing me the legal ammunition I needed. What would be the process if I decided to exercise my rights as co-signer? Yes. You'd need to provide documentation of the financial instability and file the appropriate paperwork. Given your payment history and the borrower's employment issues, you'd have a very strong case. I left that office with copies of every document and a clear understanding of my legal position. My dear daughter had no idea what kind of storm was brewing on her horizon. Third stop. My personal lawyer, Mr. Anderson. A 70-year-old man who'd been a friend of my late husband and who'd witnessed my endless sacrifices for Emma's family for decades. He'd drawn up my will, handled the paperwork when I'd helped with the house purchase, and had always expressed quiet concern about how much I was giving to ungrateful recipients. "Julia," he greeted me with genuine warmth, "what brings you to my office? You look different today, more determined somehow." I told him everything. Every cruel word Emma had spoken, every moment of contempt and dismissal, the coldness with which she'd wished for my death on her own birthday. I watched his expression grow more serious and more angry with each detail I shared. "Julia," he said finally, his voice filled with both sadness and outrage, "I'm so sorry you're going through this. In all my years of practice, I've seen many family disputes, but I never thought Emma was capable of such cruelty after everything you've done for her and her family." "Neither did I sighed, feeling a mix of sadness and liberation. "But I've made my decision. I want to change my will completely. I want to remove Emma as beneficiary of everything and leave my assets to charitable organizations. I also want to set up a trust fund for my grandchildren that Emma cannot access or control until they turn 25. "That's absolutely doable," he nodded, already taking detailed notes. "Do you also want to change the beneficiaries of your life insurance policy?" "Yes, everything. Any document that has Emma's name on it, I want her removed. My daughter told me she wishes I was dead. Well, when I do die, she's not going to receive a single penny from me." We spent 3 intensive hours reviewing every legal document in my portfolio. My $100,000 life insurance policy, my savings accounts, my retirement funds, my apartment deed, my investment portfolios. Everything that had once been designated to make Emma's life easier would now go to organizations that actually appreciated generosity and used it to help people who truly needed assistance. "There's one more thing," I said as we were finishing the paperwork. "I want you to prepare all the necessary documents to exercise my rights regarding the house where Emma lives. As the mortgage co-signer, I have legal standing to reclaim the property, and her husband just lost his job again." Mr. Anderson's eyes lit up with understanding. "Now I see the full scope of what you're planning. Are you absolutely certain you want to go this far?" "Completely certain," I replied with a determination that surprised even myself. My daughter told me her life would be easier and happier if I just disappeared. Well, I'm going to disappear from her life. But first I'm going to make sure she understands exactly what it means to live without me and without everything I've provided for her family over the years. When I left Mr. Anderson's office that evening, it was already dark outside, but I felt illuminated from within, like I'd finally found my way after being lost for years. I walked through the streets of my neighborhood feeling renewed, reborn, like I'd awakened from a very long nightmare where I'd lost myself completely. For 45 years, I had lived exclusively for Emma. I'd sacrificed my own dreams, my own comfort, my own financial security to give her everything she wanted. But those days were over forever. I returned to my apartment and did something I hadn't done in years. I opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion and poured myself a generous glass. I was toasting myself, celebrating the brave woman who'd finally decided to put her own well-being first. Felt revolutionary. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I'd saved months ago but never had the courage to use. Was for a travel agency that specialized in helping retirees relocate to other countries, offering packages for living abroad in beautiful, peaceful places where the cost of living was reasonable and the quality of life was excellent. "Good evening, this is Julia Martinez," I said when they answered. "I saw your promotional materials about living in Switzerland. Could you send me complete information about relocating there permanently?" "Of course, Mrs. Martinez. Switzerland is one of our most popular destinations among clients who want to start fresh. We have several programs ranging from temporary stays to permanent residency assistance. What type of information would be most helpful?" "Everything," I replied without a moment's hesitation. "I want to know absolutely everything about how a 72-year-old woman can start a completely new life in Switzerland, away from toxic family relationships and surrounded by beauty and peace." After hanging up, I stood at my apartment window looking out at the city where I'd lived my entire life, where I'd raised my daughter, where I'd worked for 4 decades, where I'd built memories that now felt tainted by Emma's cruelty. Soon, all of this would be nothing more than a chapter in my past. My daughter had asked for my disappearance as a birthday gift, and I was going to grant that wish in the most spectacular and transformative way possible. What Emma didn't realize was that her cruel wish was about to become the catalyst for her worst nightmare. The next few days passed in a blur of secret preparations and emotional revelations. Every morning I woke up with this incredible mix of grief and excitement that pushed me forward with my plans. It was like I'd been sleepwalking for decades and had suddenly awakened to discover a whole world of possibilities I'd never allowed myself to consider. On Wednesday morning my phone rang, and I saw Emma's name on the caller ID. For a split second, my traitorous heart sped up, thinking maybe she'd spent the last few days reflecting on her words. Maybe she'd realized how cruel she'd been and was calling to apologize. How pathetically naive I still was. "Mom," she said in that same cold, demanding voice she'd used at her birthday, "I need you to do me a favor." Not, "How are you feeling after what I said?" Not, "I've been thinking about our conversation." Not even a simple hello or good morning. She went straight to business, treating me like her personal assistant who existed solely to serve her needs. "What do you need?" I asked, genuinely curious to see how far her sense of entitlement would stretch. "The twins have this big presentation at school on Friday about family history, and Jake and I have this crucial work dinner that same night with his potential new boss. Could you watch them that evening? You know how these things are. It could determine whether he gets this job or not, and we can't afford to miss it." The sheer audacity was breathtaking. The same woman who had looked me in the eye 3 days earlier and wished for my death was now asking me to provide free babysitting services as if nothing had happened, as if I were a resource that remained available to her 24/7 regardless of how she treated me. "I can't do that," I replied simply, keeping my voice neutral and calm. "What do you mean you can't?" she asked, and I could hear genuine surprise in her voice. She wasn't used to hearing the word no from me. I'd spent 45 years saying yes to every request, every demand, every expectation. "I mean exactly that. I have other plans that evening." "What plans could you possibly have?" she asked with that condescending tone that felt like a slap across my face. As if at 72 years old, I had no right to have a social life, no right to have interests or commitments that didn't revolve around her family's convenience. "Plans that are none of your business," I replied, maintaining my composure despite the rage building inside me. "You'll need to find another babysitter." "But Mom, I can't find a good sitter on such short notice, and you know how the twins are with strangers. Besides, since when do you charge me to spend time with your own grandchildren?" There it was. The emotional manipulation she'd perfected over the years, the guilt trips that had worked so effectively for so long. But this time, her psychological tactics were falling on deaf ears. "Since you told me that your greatest birthday wish was for me to die," I answered with ice-cold clarity. "If you want me to disappear from your life, Emma, I'm starting right now." There was a long, uncomfortable silence on the other end of the line. I could practically hear the wheels turning in her head as she tried to figure out how to respond to my unexpected backbone. "Seriously?" she finally said with a sarcastic laugh. "You're going to punish me like some petulant child? I thought after a few days the melodrama would be over and you'd go back to normal." "This isn't melodrama, Emma. This is respect for your clearly expressed wishes. You wanted me to disappear from your life, so that's exactly what I'm going to do. Fine, she said with obvious annoyance, her voice sharp with frustration. If you want to be that childish and vindictive, that's your choice. But don't come crying to me later when you're sitting alone in that apartment feeling sorry for yourself. She hung up without saying goodbye, probably expecting that her threat of future loneliness would bring me crawling back with apologies. Instead, it just confirmed that I was making the right decision. That afternoon I went back to the bank, this time to do something I never thought I would have the courage to do: withdraw a substantial amount of my savings in cash for my upcoming journey. $30,000 that I put in a secure envelope and stored in my personal safe. Money that would fund my new life in Switzerland and give me the independence I'd never allowed myself to have. I also called the travel agency and made it official. I booked my flight to Zurich for the following Tuesday, with an open return ticket that could be extended indefinitely. The cost was $5,000. Money I paid without a single moment's hesitation. It was the most expensive and most intelligent investment I'd made in years. An investment in my own happiness and well-being instead of someone else's ungrateful lifestyle. On Thursday morning, I received an unexpected visitor. My neighbor Eleanor knocked on my door. This wonderful 68-year-old retired teacher who lived in the apartment next to mine. We'd developed a genuine friendship over the past 5 years, bonding over our shared love of old movies and crossword puzzles. But Eleanor had also been a silent witness to all my sacrifices for Emma's family. She'd seen me cancel countless plans with her to rush over whenever my daughter needed emergency babysitting. She'd watched me buy bags of expensive groceries to take to Emma's house while I survived on canned soup and generic crackers to stretch my own budget. She'd been there when I'd cried after particularly harsh phone calls from Emma, when I'd wondered aloud why nothing I did ever seemed to be enough. "Julia," she said, settling into my living room with a cup of coffee, "you look different these past few days. There's something changed about you. Has something significant happened?" I told her everything. Every painful, humiliating detail of Emma's birthday, every cruel word that had been spoken, every moment of contempt and dismissal. I also shared all the secret plans I'd been making, the legal changes, the financial preparations, the upcoming trip to Switzerland that might become permanent. "My God, Julia," Eleanor whispered, tears filling her eyes. "I cannot believe Emma would say something so heartless to you after everything you've sacrificed for her and her family. That girl has no idea how lucky she's been to have a mother like you." "The worst part," I explained, "is that she said it like it was the most reasonable request in the world, like I was some annoying pest that needed to be eliminated so she could finally be happy. And you're really planning to disappear completely? To let her think you might actually be?" Eleanor couldn't finish the sentence. "That's exactly what I'm planning. She asked for my death as a birthday gift. Well, she's going to get exactly what she wished for, at least from her perspective." Eleanor leaned forward with this mischievous glint in her eyes that I'd never seen before. "Julia, you know you have my complete support in this, right? What Emma did is absolutely unforgivable, and honestly, I think this shock treatment is exactly what she needs." "Actually," I said, lowering my voice conspiratorially, "I'm going to need your help with something very important." I explained my complete plan. How I wanted Emma to believe I had actually died, at least initially. Eleanor would be my accomplice, the person who would discover my empty apartment and deliver my farewell letter. She would be the one to break the devastating news to Emma that her birthday wish had apparently come true. "It's absolutely brilliant," Eleanor said with growing excitement, clapping her hands together like we were planning the heist of the century. "That ungrateful child is finally going to understand what it means to lose you permanently. She spent so many years taking you for granted, treating you like a resource instead of a human being. Will you really trust me to pull this off convincingly? Eleanor, you were a high school drama teacher for 30 years before you retired. If anyone can sell this performance, it's you." "Oh, honey," she said with a wicked smile, "this is going to be the most important role of my life. That girl is about to learn the hardest lesson she's ever received." That night, I worked on what would become the most significant letter I'd ever written, the one that Emma would find and that would shatter her comfortable world completely. I wrote and rewrote every single word, crafting each sentence to deliver maximum impact, making sure it conveyed not just my pain but also the full scope of what she was losing. "My dearest Emma," the letter began, "you asked me as a birthday gift to disappear from your life forever, and I have decided to grant your wish completely. By the time you read these words, I will already be far away from here, beginning the life I should have been living for years instead of sacrificing everything for your happiness and comfort. I spent hours documenting every financial sacrifice I'd made, every opportunity I'd missed because I was always available for her family's needs, every dream I'd deferred because her wants always took priority over my own well-being. But this wasn't just a bitter recounting of grievances. It was an educational document designed to show her exactly what she'd thrown away. Along with this letter," I continued writing, "you will find copies of all the legal documents I have signed this week. The complete change of my will that removes you as beneficiary of my life insurance, savings and property. The cancellation of your family's health insurance policy that I've been paying for 3 years. The notification that as co-signer of your mortgage, I am exercising my legal rights due to Jake's repeated unemployment and your family's ongoing financial instability. The termination of all financial support, emergency funds, and assistance that you have taken for granted for so many years." The letter grew to 28 pages as I meticulously detailed every aspect of our relationship that was about to change permanently. I documented every penny I'd spent, every sacrifice I'd made, every time I'd put her needs before my own health and happiness. "You told me that your life would be much easier and happier without me," the letter concluded. "And now you'll have the opportunity to discover if that's actually true. Your life will indeed be much easier without my constant presence, but it will also be much more expensive, much more complicated, and much lonelier than you ever imagined. I hope the freedom you wanted so desperately is worth the price you'll pay for it." On Friday evening, as I was carefully packing my most treasured possessions into 2 suitcases, photos from happier times, my mother's jewelry, letters from old friends, books that had sustained me through difficult periods, my phone rang again. Emma's name appeared on the screen, and I considered not answering. But curiosity got the better of me. "Mom," she said, and I could hear something different in her voice. Not quite panic, but definitely concern. "I've been calling you for 2 days and you haven't been answering. What's going on?" "I told you what was going on, Emma. I'm respecting your wishes and removing myself from your life. Look, I know what I said was harsh, but you're taking this way too far. Jake really might get this job and we need you to watch the twins tomorrow night. Can't we just put this drama aside for now?" "Drama?" I repeated, feeling that familiar surge of anger. "You call a mother's heartbreak over her daughter's cruelty drama? Mom, you're being way too sensitive about this. I was stressed, I said some things I didn't mean, but you know I love you. Can't we just move past this?" "No, Emma, we cannot move past this. Some words can't be taken back, some wounds can't be healed, and some relationships can't be repaired once they've been destroyed." "Fine," she said, her voice hardening again. "If you want to be this stubborn and vindictive, that's your choice. But don't blame me when you're sitting alone wondering why your only daughter doesn't call anymore." The irony was devastating. She was threatening me with the very isolation she'd already imposed, the very abandonment she'd already promised me. Saturday morning brought an unexpected visitor to my door. It was Jake, my former son-in-law, looking haggard and desperate. His usually neat appearance was disheveled. His eyes were bloodshot, and he had the look of a man who'd been losing sleep. "Julia," he said, his voice pleading, "Emma told me about what happened between you two. I know what she said was completely wrong, but please don't punish our whole family for her mistake." "Punish?" I asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. "How am I punishing anyone? By withdrawing all your support, by cutting us off financially, by refusing to help with the kids. We've become so dependent on your assistance over the years." And now Jake looked down at his feet, obviously ashamed but desperately trying to find words that would change my mind. "Jake," I said gently, "your wife was very clear about her feelings. She told me in no uncertain terms that my presence in her life was a burden she no longer wanted to carry. I'm simply respecting her wishes. But Julia, you know how Emma gets when she's stressed. She didn't really mean those things. She's been under so much pressure with my job situation and the kids' school problems and the financial strain. She just lashed out at the wrong person. The wrong person. I'm not just a person, Jake. I'm her mother. I'm the woman who has sacrificed her entire adult life to make sure Emma had everything she needed and wanted. And when I finally needed to feel valued and loved, she wished for my death. Jake's shoulders slumped in defeat. He knew he had no argument that could defend the indefensible. Please, he said, his voice breaking, just give me a chance to make this right. I'll talk to Emma. I'll make her understand how wrong she was, how much she's hurt you. It's too late for that, I replied, slowly closing the door. Some damage can't be undone, Jake. Give my love to the twins, and tell them their grandmother will always love them, even from far away. Sunday was my last full day in that city, and I spent it like a farewell tour of my own life. I walked through all the places that had been significant, the hospital where I'd worked for 4 decades, saving lives and comforting families in their darkest moments. The park where I'd taken Emma as a child, pushing her on swings and teaching her to ride a bicycle. The church where I'd married her father and later mourned his death. The little cafe where Emma and I used to have lunch dates when she was in college, before life became so complicated and our relationship became so transactional. It was my silent goodbye to a life I had lived almost entirely for other people's benefit. Tomorrow, I would begin a life that I would finally live for myself. Sunday night I couldn't sleep, not from anxiety or regret, but from this strange, exhilarating emotion I hadn't felt in decades: anticipation. At 72 years old, I was about to embark on the greatest adventure of my life, to discover who Julia Martinez really was when she wasn't defined by her role as Emma's endlessly giving mother. At 5 o'clock Monday morning, Eleanor knocked on my door exactly as we'd planned. She brought fresh coffee and croissants from the bakery down the street, and that mischievous, knowing smile that had become our secret signal of conspiracy. "Ready for your great escape?" she asked, practically bouncing with excitement. "More than ready," I replied, carrying my 2 suitcases to the door. "This feels like the first day of my real life." We'd choreographed every detail of our plan. Eleanor would wait exactly 48 hours after my departure, then visit Emma's house with the devastating news. She would tell Emma that she'd been concerned when I hadn't answered my phone for 2 days, that she'd knocked on my door repeatedly with no response, and that when she'd used her emergency key to check on me, she'd found the apartment completely empty except for the letter addressed to Emma on the kitchen table. "Remember," I said as we waited for the taxi, "you need to act absolutely distraught. Tell her you're terrified something horrible has happened to me, that you've already called the hospitals and the police. Make her believe that her birthday wish might have actually come true." "Julia, darling," Eleanor said with theatrical flair, "I spent 3 decades teaching teenagers how to believably portray Shakespearean tragedy. This performance is going to be my masterpiece." The taxi arrived precisely at 6 a.m. As the driver loaded my suitcases into the trunk, I took one final look at my apartment building, at the windows of the small space where I'd lived for 15 years. Strangely, I felt no nostalgia, no sadness at leaving. It was more like finally being released from a prison I'd built for myself, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. "Where to?" the taxi driver asked as we pulled away from the curb. "To the airport," I said, and those 3 words felt like the beginning of my liberation. During the 45-minute drive through the city I was leaving behind, I reflected on everything I was walking away from. My volunteer work at the Children's Hospital, which had been fulfilling but had also been another way of giving myself away to others. My small social circle, which had gradually shrunk over the years as I'd cancelled more and more plans to be available for Emma's family emergencies. The daily routines that had revolved around being perpetually on call for my daughter's needs. But I also thought about everything that was waiting for me in Switzerland. The freedom to make decisions based on my own desires for the first time in decades. The opportunity to spend my money on experiences that would bring me joy instead of funding someone else's ungrateful lifestyle. The chance to discover who I really was when I wasn't constantly worried about someone else's problems and emotional demands. At the airport, while waiting for my flight in the departure lounge, I received a series of text messages from Emma. The progression was fascinating to watch. "Mom, Jake said you were really upset yesterday. Let's talk about this like adults." 30 minutes later. "I don't understand why you're not answering your phone. This silent treatment is getting ridiculous." An hour later. "The twins are asking where Grandma is. You're being selfish by involving them in our disagreement." And finally. "Fine, if you want to act like a child, that's your choice. But don't expect me to chase after you forever." I deleted each message without responding. It was remarkable how even in her attempts at reconciliation, Emma managed to make everything about her own convenience and emotional needs. The flight to Zurich was long but incredibly peaceful. For the first time in years, literally no one in the world knew exactly where I was. No one could call me with emergencies that weren't really emergencies. No one could demand my time, my money, my emotional energy. The sense of freedom was so intense it was almost overwhelming. During the 12-hour journey, I wrote extensively in a journal I'd brought specifically for this purpose. I documented every emotion, every memory, every detail of the transformation I was experiencing. I wanted to remember exactly what it felt like to choose myself for the first time in my adult life. I arrived at Zurich Airport on Tuesday night local time, feeling both exhausted from the travel and energized by the magnitude of what I'd just accomplished. Klaus from the travel agency was waiting for me at customs with a sign bearing my name. A kind, efficient young man who spoke perfect English and radiated the sort of professional warmth that felt genuine. "Mrs. Martinez." He greeted me with a smile that seemed to light up his entire face. "Welcome to Switzerland. I hope you're prepared for a completely new chapter in your life." "More prepared than I've ever been for anything," I replied, and I realized that for the first time in weeks, my smile was absolutely, completely authentic. Klaus drove me through the streets of Zurich in the agency's comfortable van, pointing out landmarks and giving me a running commentary on the city that would potentially become my new home. The furnished apartment he'd secured for me was in the heart of downtown, within walking distance of Lake Zurich, with windows that offered both a park view and glimpses of the lake that looked like something from a postcard. "Here's all the information you'll need to get settled," Klaus said, handing me a comprehensive folder. Restaurant recommendations, cultural activities specifically designed for people in your age group, German language classes, social clubs, walking groups, everything you might want to explore. I've also scheduled an appointment with a financial advisor for Thursday afternoon to help you navigate the banking system if you decide to make this move permanent. That first night in Switzerland, I slept more deeply and peacefully than I had in months. There was no phone beside my bed that might ring with urgent demands for money or time. There were no responsibilities beyond taking care of my own basic needs. There was no one who required anything from me except myself. Wednesday morning, I woke up early and stepped out to explore my temporary neighborhood. I had breakfast at a charming little cafe overlooking the lake, where I ordered fresh pastries and strong coffee that cost more than I would have allowed myself to spend back home, where every expenditure had been filtered through the question of whether Emma's family might need that money for something more important. I bought fresh flowers from my apartment, bright, cheerful tulips that served no purpose except to make me happy. I purchased a beautiful silk scarf from a boutique window that had caught my eye, spending $100 on something completely unnecessary simply because I loved the colors and the way it felt against my skin. As I walked along the lake path, watching swans glide across the water while mountains rose majestically in the distance, I found myself calculating something I'd never allowed myself to consider before. In just the past 5 years, I had spent at least $60,000 on Emma's family. The mortgage payments during Jake's unemployment, the twins' orthodontics, emergency car repairs, home improvements I'd helped fund, endless gifts for birthdays and holidays, groceries I'd supplied during their tight months. $60,000 that I could have used to travel the world, to live in comfortable surroundings, to pursue hobbies and interests and experiences that would have enriched my own life instead of subsidizing the lifestyle of people who saw my generosity as an entitlement rather than a gift. At exactly 2 p.m. Zurich time, 8 a.m. back home, I calculated that Eleanor would be preparing to visit Emma's house and deliver the news that would change everything. I sat on a bench overlooking the lake and waited, knowing that in a few hours my phone would start ringing with a desperation I'd never heard before from my daughter. But until that happened, I was going to enjoy every moment of this peaceful morning in one of the most beautiful places on earth, finally free to experience life without the constant weight of other people's expectations and demands. At 5 p.m. local time, right on schedule, my phone began to vibrate insistently. Emma's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring until it stopped. Then immediately it started again. This time I answered. "Mom!" she screamed, her voice cracking with what sounded like genuine panic. "Where are you? Eleanor came to the house this morning with a letter from you. She said you've disappeared completely and she thinks something terrible might have happened. What's going on? Where are you?" "Hello, Emma," I replied calmly, gazing out at the Swiss mountains while I spoke. "I hope you had a chance to read the letter thoroughly." "Yes, I read every word." "Are you completely insane? How could you do this to us? How could you just abandon your family? Where are you right now?" "I'm exactly where I need to be," I answered, feeling a sense of satisfaction that was almost intoxicating. "I'm far away from you and your toxic demands, just like you wished for on your birthday. But I didn't want this. I didn't want you to actually disappear forever. I was just angry and frustrated. I didn't mean what I said." There it was, Emma's predictable response pattern. First shock, then panic, then the attempt to minimize the damage she'd caused and make me feel guilty for taking her at her word. "You didn't mean it when you looked me directly in the eyes and told me that your greatest birthday wish was for me to die?" I asked because I wanted her to hear those words again, to confront the full cruelty of what she'd said. It was just, I was having such a stressful time. Jake lost his job again, the twins have been having problems at school, money has been so tight, I felt overwhelmed. I shouldn't have taken my frustration out on you, but I never meant for you to take it this literally. You're absolutely right, Emma. You shouldn't have taken your stress out on me. But you did, and now we both have to live with the consequences of your choices. But Mom, please, you have to come back. We need you. I need you. How fascinating. Now she needed me. Now that she'd discovered the letter detailing all the financial benefits she was losing. Now that she'd realized her house might be taken away. Now that she understood she'd have to pay for her own health insurance, find paid babysitters for the twins, handle her own family emergencies without my financial safety net. Do you need me, Emma, or do you need my money and services? I asked directly, cutting through the emotional manipulation. There was a long, telling silence on the other end of the line. I need you, she finally whispered, but her voice lacked any conviction whatsoever. Emma, for 45 years I lived exclusively for your happiness and comfort. I sacrificed my dreams, my financial security, my social life, my personal interests, every opportunity for my own fulfillment. And when I finally reached the point where I needed to feel valued and loved and appreciated, you told me you wished I was dead. Those words broke something inside me that can never be repaired. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I know what I said was horrible. Sorry isn't nearly enough, Emma. The damage has been done, and it's permanent. And you know what? Maybe it was the best thing you could have said to me, because it finally forced me to open my eyes and understand that I've been living my entire adult life completely wrong. What do you mean? She asked, her voice small and confused. I mean that for the first time in decades, I am living for myself, making decisions based on my own happiness and well-being, and it feels absolutely wonderful. Where are you, Mom? Please just tell me where you are. The twins keep asking about their grandmother. They don't understand why you haven't called or visited. It was interesting how suddenly the grandchildren missed me. 4 years, when I'd arranged my entire schedule around their needs, when I'd bought them expensive gifts and provided free babysitting and taken them on outings while Emma and Jake enjoyed their social life, my presence had been taken for granted. But now that I was unavailable, my absence was apparently devastating. The twins will be fine, I replied, looking out at the peaceful Swiss countryside. Children are remarkably resilient and adaptable. What they'll learn from this experience is that actions have consequences, that cruel words can destroy relationships permanently, and that love and respect must be mutual to survive. But Mom, you can't just disappear from their lives like this. What if something happens to you? What if you get sick or need help? How will we even know? Now she was concerned about my health and well-being. How convenient and how hypocritical. Emma, in the past 5 years, I've had 3 serious episodes of high blood pressure that required emergency hospitalization. Do you remember how many times you visited me during those health crises? Another long silence. She remembered perfectly. The first time, I continued, I called you from the emergency room, scared and alone, and you told me you couldn't come because you had a hair appointment that you'd been trying to get for months. The second time coincided with Jake's birthday celebration, and you said the family party was too important to cancel. The third time, you simply didn't answer your phone at all. Hey, I thought they weren't serious emergencies, she mumbled weakly. Of course you did, because my health was never a priority for you unless it affected your access to my services. But my financial contributions were always treated as urgent necessities. It's not about the money, Emma suddenly screamed, her voice cracking with desperation. It's about you. I miss you, Mom. Do you miss me? Or do you miss having someone available 24 hours a day to solve your problems and fund your lifestyle? I ended the call without waiting for her answer, then immediately turned off my phone completely. I needed silence and peace to fully enjoy my first evening of complete freedom from my daughter's emotional manipulation. That night, I treated myself to dinner at the most elegant restaurant I could find near the lake. I ordered the most expensive item on the menu, fresh lobster with truffle butter that cost $85. And I drank an entire bottle of French champagne that cost more than I used to allow myself to spend on food in a month. It had been literal years since I'd indulged in such luxury, always calculating that any discretionary money could be better used for Emma's family's needs. But sitting there in that beautiful restaurant, watching the lights of Zurich twinkle across the water while I savored every bite of my expensive meal, I felt more alive and authentic than I had in decades. The next morning, Thursday, I had my appointment with Herr Meyer, the financial consultant Klaus had recommended. He was an older, distinguished gentleman who specialized in helping American retirees relocate to Switzerland permanently. With your current savings and your American pension, he explained, reviewing my financial information with professional thoroughness, you can live quite comfortably here for the rest of your life. Switzerland has excellent healthcare programs for retired foreigners, and the quality of life is exceptional. You've also arrived at a perfect time. The exchange rates are favorable for American currency. For the first time in years, I was discussing my finances without the underlying anxiety about keeping money in reserve for Emma's inevitable emergencies. It was liberating to calculate my expenses and plan my future based solely on my own needs and desires. You should also consider investing a portion of your savings in the Swiss economy, Herr Meyer continued. The returns are stable and secure. Based on your financial profile, you could potentially double your assets over the next 5 to 7 years if you invest wisely. Double my assets. How many times had I missed that opportunity because I was constantly draining my savings to subsidize my daughter's lifestyle? Is there anything else you should know about American retirees living in Switzerland? Yes. Well, we have quite a large community of clients in situations similar to yours. Older Americans who have come to Switzerland seeking a fresh start after complicated family relationships. You're definitely not alone in this experience, and there are support groups and social networks specifically for people making this transition. That information was incredibly comforting. I wasn't the only mother who had been emotionally and financially exploited by ungrateful adult children. There was an entire community of people who had chosen their own well-being over the toxic demands of their families. On Friday morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I joined a hiking group for seniors. There were 12 participants, all between 60 and 75 years old, all looking for adventure and new experiences in their retirement years. The organizer was a vibrant 70-year-old Austrian woman named Ingrid who radiated energy and joy. During the bus ride to our hiking destination, I struck up a conversation with a German woman named Helga who appeared to be about my age. "What brought you to Switzerland?" she asked as we admired the spectacular mountain scenery through the bus window. A daughter who told me that her greatest birthday wish was for me to die. I answered without sugarcoating the truth. I no longer had the energy to pretend that my family situation was normal or healthy. Helga's eyes widened in shock, then filled with understanding sympathy. Seriously? Your own daughter said that to you? Completely seriously. After I'd financed her house, essentially raised her children as unpaid childcare, and sacrificed my entire retirement savings for her family's comfort, she told me that my presence in her life was an unbearable burden and that she wished I would disappear forever. My God, Helga murmured, reaching over to squeeze my hand. And what did you do? What any self-respecting woman should do, I replied with growing confidence. I disappeared from her life completely and came here to start over. Helga smiled with what looked like admiration. You are incredibly brave. It took me almost 3 years to make the decision to walk away from my toxic family situation. My son and daughter-in-law treated me like a human item, only contacting me when they needed money for their vacations, new cars, or home improvements. For the rest of that day, Helga and I shared our stories of family exploitation and emotional abuse. She had come to Switzerland after her adult children accused her of being selfish when she tried to set financial boundaries, then threatened to prevent her from seeing her grandchildren if she didn't continue funding their lifestyle. The first few months were difficult, Helga admitted as we walked through a medieval village that looked like something from a fairy tale. The guilt was overwhelming. I constantly questioned whether I was really being selfish, whether a good mother should always sacrifice for her children regardless of how they treated her. What changed your perspective? I asked, genuinely curious about her journey. I gradually realized that my children had never once asked if I was happy, if I had enough money for my own needs, if my constant financial sacrifices were negatively impacting my own life and well-being. They only cared about what I could provide for them. That's not love, Julia. That's exploitation disguised as family obligation. Her words resonated so deeply that I felt tears welling up in my eyes. For decades, I had confused emotional manipulation with genuine love, constant demands with legitimate need, and financial exploitation with family responsibility. That evening, back in my Swiss apartment, I made the decision to turn on my phone for the first time since Wednesday. I found 67 missed calls and 53 text messages, mostly from Emma and Jake, but also from some numbers I didn't recognize. I read through the text messages chronologically, watching the evolution of Emma's desperation and panic. Day 1. Mom, please answer your phone. Eleanor scared us with her visit. We need to know you're okay. Day 2. This is getting ridiculous. Whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. Time to come home. Day 3. I called the hospitals and the police. They said there's nothing they can do since you left a letter explaining your departure. Please just call me back. Day 4. The bank called about our joint account. Cancelled it. How are we supposed to handle emergencies? Day 5. The mortgage company wants to meet with us tomorrow. They're saying something about you exercising your rights as co-signer. What does that mean? And finally that morning. Mom, please, I'm begging you. Whatever I did wrong, we can fix it. The kids are crying for their grandma. This has gone too far. I decided to send one final text message. I am perfectly safe and happier than I've been in years. What you're experiencing now are the natural consequences of your cruel words and actions. I hope this teaches you to value the people who love you before you lose them permanently. The response came within minutes. Please, Mom, we can work this out. I promise I'll never say hurtful things like that again. Just tell me where you are and we'll figure out how to fix this. I wrote back. Empty promises from a desperate person don't heal broken hearts, Emma. You revealed your true feelings about me on your birthday. I can't pretend I didn't hear them, and I can't continue pretending that our relationship was healthy or reciprocal. After sending that message, I blocked Emma's number, Jake's number, and all the unknown numbers that had been calling me. I also blocked their social media accounts and email addresses. It was time to close that chapter of my life completely and permanently. On Monday morning, I met again with Herr Meyer to sign all the paperwork that would allow me to establish permanent Swiss residency. I also made arrangements to transfer my American pension permanently, and began the process of selling my apartment back home through a long-distance real estate agent. Are you absolutely certain you want to make this change permanent? Herr Meyer asked as I signed document after document. It's a very significant life decision. I have never been more certain of anything in my life, I replied, my signature firm and confident on every page. For the first time in decades, I'm making decisions based on my own happiness and well-being rather than someone else's demands and expectations. That afternoon, I received a call from Eleanor, my dear neighbor and co-conspirator. Her voice was bubbling with excitement and satisfaction. Julia, you absolutely must hear about what happened when I went to Emma's house, she said. The performance of a lifetime doesn't even begin to describe it. Tell me everything, I said, settling into my favorite chair with a cup of Swiss hot chocolate. I showed up at her door looking absolutely distraught, wringing my hands and practically in tears. I told her I'd been worried sick when you didn't answer your phone for 2 days, that I'd knocked on your door for an hour with no response, and that when I used my emergency key, I found the apartment completely empty except for this letter on the kitchen table addressed to her. How did she react? At first, she was annoyed, like she thought you were just being dramatic. But when she started reading that letter, Julia, I watched her face change from irritation to shock to absolute panic. By page 10, she was crying hysterically. By page 20, she was hyperventilating and Jake had to get her a paper bag to breathe into. And then she started calling everyone. Hospitals, police, your workplace, anyone she could think of. She was convinced you'd actually. Well, you know. She kept screaming that it was all her fault, that she'd killed her own mother with her cruel words. I felt a complex mix of emotions. Not quite satisfaction, but definitely a sense that justice was being served. But that's not even the best part, Eleanor continued. 3 days later, she came to my apartment begging me to tell you to come back, claiming it had all been a terrible misunderstanding. And when I told her that what she'd said to you was absolutely unforgivable, and that if I were in your position I would have disappeared too, you should have seen her face. She was devastated to realize that even the neighbors knew how cruelly she'd treated you. Did she say anything about the financial implications? Oh, honey, yes. She told me the bank was threatening to foreclose on their house, that Jake couldn't find stable employment, that without your financial support they couldn't afford basic necessities for the children. She basically admitted that she didn't miss you as a person. She missed your function as a provider and problem solver. That was exactly what I had expected. She didn't miss me as a person, as her mother who had loved her unconditionally for 45 years. She missed my function as an ATM and emergency service provider. Eleanor, I told her, when anyone asks about me in the future, especially Emma, I want you to tell them that Julia Martinez is dead to them. Because in a very real sense, that's true. The woman who constantly sacrificed herself for an ungrateful daughter really did die on Emma's birthday. I understand completely, Eleanor replied with satisfaction. And you know what? I think it's the best death you could have chosen. You've been reborn as someone who finally values herself. 3 weeks after my arrival in Switzerland, my new life had taken shape in ways I never could have imagined possible. I had enrolled in German language classes 3 times a week, determined to become fluent in my new country's primary language. I'd started watercolor painting classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, rediscovering an artistic passion I'd abandoned decades ago when Emma's needs became my full-time occupation. I joined a book club for English-speaking expats that met every Sunday afternoon in a cozy cafe near the lake. For the first time in decades, my calendar was filled with activities that I had chosen based on my own interests and desires. Activities that brought me genuine joy, personal growth, and intellectual stimulation rather than serving someone else's convenience. But you know what the most surprising discovery was, driver? The money. Without Emma's constant financial emergencies and demands, my savings weren't just remaining stable. They were actually growing substantially. The investments I'd made with Herr Meyer's guidance were already showing positive returns, and for the first time in my adult life, I could plan my financial future based solely on my own needs and dreams. On a Thursday morning 3 weeks into my Swiss adventure, As I was having breakfast at my favorite lakeside cafe and reading a German newspaper, surprised myself by how much I was understanding, I received a phone call from an international number I didn't recognize. I hesitated to answer, thinking it might be Emma calling from a different phone, but curiosity won out. Mrs. Martinez. A professional female voice with an American accent asked. Yes, this is she. Who's calling? My name is Sarah Williams. I'm a social worker with the Family Services Department in your hometown. I'm calling because we've received a formal complaint about your well-being and mental state. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. A complaint? What kind of complaint? Your daughter, Emma Johnson, has filed an official report alleging that you may be suffering from dementia or severe cognitive decline. According to her statement, you've made erratic financial and personal decisions that put you at serious risk, including disappearing suddenly from your home and potentially living in dangerous conditions abroad. She's requesting that we initiate a competency evaluation. I literally could not believe what I was hearing. Emma had gone to the extreme of involving government social services, essentially trying to have me declared mentally incompetent to invalidate all the legal and financial decisions I'd made. She was attempting to use the power of the state to force me back under her control. Miss Williams, I replied, my voice steady despite my rage. I want to be absolutely clear about something. I do not suffer from dementia, cognitive decline, or any form of mental impairment. I am living in Switzerland entirely by my own choice, in a comfortable apartment with excellent healthcare access, and I am in perfect mental health. My daughter's allegations are completely false and appear to be motivated by financial concerns rather than genuine worry about my well-being. I understand your position, Mrs. Martinez, but we're legally required to investigate all reports of potential elder abuse or neglect, even when they involve self-neglect. Would you be willing to undergo a comprehensive medical and psychological evaluation through the American consulate in Switzerland? Absolutely, I replied without hesitation. I welcome any evaluation that will demonstrate I'm in perfect mental health, and that all my decisions have been made with complete lucidity and careful consideration. After coordinating the details for the evaluation, I hung up feeling a mixture of fury and disbelief that Emma would stoop so low. She hadn't just wished me dead. Now she was trying to destroy my reputation and mental credibility to regain control over my finances and my life choices. I immediately called my lawyer back home. Mr. Anderson, I said when he answered, I need to tell you about the latest development in my daughter's campaign to invalidate my legal decisions. Julia, I'm glad to hear your voice. I've had quite an interesting week dealing with Emma's new legal representation. Let me guess. She's hired someone to challenge all the changes I made before leaving. Exactly. She's claiming that you weren't in your right mind when you signed all those documents. And now I've learned she's also filed a complaint with social services alleging dementia. Can she actually succeed with this strategy? She can try, but she doesn't have any legitimate legal grounds, Mr. Anderson assured me. I have detailed recordings of all our conversations that clearly demonstrate your complete mental clarity and careful deliberation. Furthermore, the fact that you successfully planned and executed an international relocation while living independently abroad completely contradicts any allegations of cognitive impairment. What else is she trying to do? She's attempted to access your bank accounts under the guise of concern for your welfare. She also tried to halt the foreclosure process on her house. But since all the legal documentation is properly executed and she herself acknowledged Jake's employment instability in writing, she has no valid arguments. It was astounding how far Emma was willing to go to reclaim the financial benefits she'd lost through her own cruelty. Mr. Anderson, I want you to prepare a defamation lawsuit against my daughter. Her false allegations about my mental state could damage my reputation and my legal rights. It would be my absolute pleasure, he replied with unmistakable satisfaction. After witnessing how she's treated you over the years, I think it's time for her to face some real consequences for her actions. 2 days later, I appeared at the American consulate in Zurich for the most comprehensive medical and psychological evaluation of my life. The examining physician was Dr. Robert Chen, an experienced psychiatrist who had obviously dealt with similar family manipulation cases before. Mrs. Martinez, he told me after a thorough 3-hour examination that included cognitive testing, memory assessments, and detailed psychological evaluation. I want to be completely clear about my findings. Not only are you in excellent mental health with no signs of cognitive decline whatsoever, but the decisions you've made demonstrate remarkable clarity, courage, and wisdom. Your daughter's allegations appear to be a transparent attempt to manipulate the legal system for financial gain. Will this be officially documented? Yes. Absolutely. I'll be sending a comprehensive report to the Social Services Department explaining that her complaints are entirely baseless and that you're living a healthy, independent life. I'll also note that filing false reports about family members' mental health can have serious legal consequences if the pattern continues. That evening, I received a call from Sarah Williams, the social worker. Mrs. Martinez, we've received Dr. Chen's detailed report from the consulate. It's clear that your daughter's allegations are without merit. We're closing this case immediately and will be notifying Emma that her complaints were unfounded. Will there be any record of this false complaint? Yes, it will be documented that she filed an unfounded report about a family member's mental health, which could have legal implications if similar complaints are filed in the future. Perfect. Emma had not only failed in her attempt to have me declared incompetent, but she now had an official government record of filing false complaints about my well-being. That night, I decided to do something I'd been considering for weeks. I began writing an extensive account of my entire experience. Not just for Emma, but for other mothers and older women who might be trapped in similar situations of emotional manipulation and financial exploitation by their adult children. I wrote for 6 straight hours, documenting every sacrifice I'd made, every manipulation I'd endured, every step I'd taken to reclaim my dignity and independence. It was a 40-page document that I titled, When Maternal Love Becomes Self-Destruction, My Journey from Exploitation to Liberation at 72. I decided to submit this account to an online blog I discovered that specialized in stories of older women who had found the courage to radically transform their lives after decades of putting everyone else's needs first. A week later, I received an enthusiastic response from the editor, a woman named Patricia. Julia, your story is both powerful and inspiring. We've received hundreds of comments from women who completely identify with your experience. Would you be interested in participating in a video interview for our YouTube channel? Your story could help thousands of women who are currently trapped in similar situations. Accepted immediately. It was time to use my painful experience to help other women who were being emotionally and financially exploited by ungrateful family members. The video interview was published 2 weeks later and quickly went viral across multiple social media platforms. Within days, thousands of women were sharing eerily similar stories of adult children who manipulated them emotionally and exploited them financially. The comments section became a catalog of shared pain and recognition. My 38-year-old son lives in my house rent-free and screams at me when I ask him to contribute to household expenses or look for employment, wrote one woman. My daughter only calls when she needs money for vacations or shopping sprees, but she's always too busy to visit when I'm sick or lonely, shared another. I thought I was the only mother who felt used and unappreciated by her own children, confessed a third. After watching your interview, I finally found the courage to say no when my son demanded I give him my car. Because his needs are more important than mine, wrote a fourth. But the most impactful response came a week after the interview aired. I received an email from an address I immediately recognized. It was Jake, my former son-in-law. Julia, he wrote, I saw your YouTube interview and I need you to know that I completely agree with everything you said. What Emma said to you on her birthday was absolutely unforgivable, and the way she's treated you for years has been appalling. I've been a witness to how she manipulates and exploits you, but I never had the courage to confront her about it because we were so financially dependent on your constant help. The email continued. I want you to know that the twins miss you terribly and ask about you constantly. They don't understand why their grandmother doesn't call or visit anymore. Emma has told them that you're sick and can't travel, but I believe they deserve to know the truth when they're old enough to understand it. Jake's message concluded. I know it's probably too late for apologies to mean anything, but I want you to know that at least one person in this family acknowledges how badly we treated you and how much you sacrificed for our comfort and happiness. I hope you're genuinely happy in your new life. And I hope this experience teaches me to be a better husband and father. I read that email 3 times before deciding how to respond. Finally, I wrote back, Jake, I appreciate your honesty and your acknowledgement of what happened, but apologies after the damage is done don't repair broken relationships. I hope this experience helps you become a better person, and that you teach your children to value and respect the people who love them before they lose those relationships permanently. It was the first time anyone in Emma's family had publicly acknowledged the emotional abuse I'd endured for years. It didn't change my decision to remain in Switzerland, but it did provide some validation that I hadn't been imagining or exaggerating the toxic dynamics. 6 months after my arrival in Switzerland, my new life had flourished beyond my wildest dreams. It was a perfect spring morning when I received a phone call that would provide the final piece of poetic justice to my story. It was Eleanor, my dear neighbor and co-conspirator, calling with news that made my heart race with anticipation. Julia, she said, her voice practically vibrating with excitement, you absolutely must hear what's happened. Emma lost the house. Despite everything that had transpired, a part of me still felt concern for my grandchildren's well-being. Tell me exactly what happened, I said. The bank completed the foreclosure process last week. Jake couldn't find stable employment, they fell behind on mortgage payments for 3 consecutive months, and since you exercised your legal rights as co-signer, the bank proceeded with seizing the property. Emma showed up at my door yesterday crying so hysterically I thought she might collapse. And the children? Are they safe? They moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. Jake finally found a job at a manufacturing plant. It pays significantly less than his previous position, but at least it's steady work. Emma had to go back to work too, at a retail store in the mall. For the first time in their marriage, they're both working regular jobs and living within their actual means instead of being subsidized by your generosity. It was strange, the complex mix of emotions I felt. I didn't experience joy at their hardship, but there was definitely a deep sense that justice had finally been served. For the first time in their adult lives, Emma and Jake were experiencing the genuine consequences of their poor decisions and irresponsible behavior without having someone to rescue them from reality. There's more, Eleanor continued. The house was sold by the bank, and since you were the co-signer who had paid into the mortgage, you're entitled to recover your original investment plus accumulated interest. How much are we talking about? The bank has approved a payment of $185,000 to you. That's your original $150,000 down payment plus $35,000 in accrued interest and legal fees. The money should be transferred to your Swiss account within the next week. I was speechless. Not only had I recovered my substantial investment that I'd written off as lost forever, but I was actually receiving additional compensation. And Julia, Eleanor added, your apartment finally sold too. After real estate commissions and closing costs, the net proceeds are $95,000. In total, I was receiving almost $280,000 in recovered assets that I had never expected to see again. Combined with my existing savings and the successful investments I'd made in Switzerland, my net worth now exceeded $500,000. At 72 years old, I was financially stronger than I had ever been in my entire life. That night, I celebrated at the most elegant restaurant in Zurich, ordering a 7-course tasting menu with wine pairings that cost more than I used to spend on groceries in 2 months. As I dined while watching the lights of the city reflect on the lake, I thought about the incredible journey that had brought me to this moment. I had started this transformation as a broken, humiliated mother, devastated by the cruelest words I'd ever heard from another human being. But now I was an independent woman, financially secure, surrounded by genuine friends who valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide, living the life I had always dreamed of but never dared to pursue. The next day, I decided to do something I'd been considering for months. Write a comprehensive book about my experience. Not just my personal story, but a practical guide for older women trapped in toxic family relationships who needed encouragement and strategies to reclaim their lives. I contacted a Swiss publisher that specialized in self-help and personal development books. The editor, a compassionate woman named Bridget, was immediately intrigued. "Julia," she told me during our meeting, "your story addresses an epidemic problem that affects millions of women but is rarely discussed openly in our society. Emotional and financial exploitation by adult children is far more common than most people realize, and it needs to be exposed and addressed." I spent the next 4 months writing When Love Hurts, Liberating Yourself from Family Emotional Abuse After 70. The book documented not only my personal journey but also practical strategies for recognizing manipulation, establishing healthy boundaries, protecting financial assets, and finding the courage to prioritize one's own well-being even when it means disappointing family members. The book was published 8 months later and became a bestseller in several European countries within weeks of its release. The letters I received from readers were both heartbreaking and inspiring. Thousands of women sharing similar stories of exploitation and finding courage through my example. "I read your book and finally understood that I'm not a selfish mother for refusing to continue financing my 40-year-old son's refusal to work," wrote Maria from Spain. "Your story helped me realize that genuine love shouldn't require complete self-destruction," Carmen from Mexico shared with me. "After reading your book, I sold my large house and moved to a small apartment I can afford without depending on my children's help, that always came with strings attached. For the first time in years I sleep peacefully," Rosa from Argentina told me. But the letter that moved me most profoundly arrived exactly 1 year after the book's publication. It was from a young mother named Andrea. "Mrs. Martinez, I'm 30 years old with a 65-year-old mother who has sacrificed her entire adult life for me and my siblings. After reading your book, I realized we were treating her exactly the way Emma treated you, as a resource to be exploited rather than a person to be loved and respected. Your story opened my eyes to the toxic patterns I was perpetuating and made me understand that I was destroying my relationship with my mother through my selfishness and ingratitude." Andrea's letter continued. "Yesterday, I called my mother and apologized genuinely for all the years I'd taken her for granted. I told her I wanted to help her pursue her own dreams and interests instead of expecting her to always be available for mine. We're planning a vacation together next month. The first time in decades that we'll be doing something purely for her enjoyment. Thank you for helping me understand this before it was too late to repair our relationship." That letter brought tears of joy to my eyes. My pain and transformation had served a purpose beyond my own liberation. It had prevented other families from experiencing the same destructive patterns. 2 years after my arrival in Switzerland, I received something that surprised me more than anything else in this entire journey. It was a physical letter delivered to my apartment, written in careful, childlike handwriting that I recognized immediately. "Dear Grandma Julia," my twin grandchildren had written, now 14 years old, "Dad finally told us the truth about why you moved away. He explained that Mom said some very cruel things to you and that's why you decided to start a new life far from us. We want you to know that we miss you every single day and that we completely understand why you left. We're also proud of you for being brave enough to choose your own happiness." The letter continued. "When we're older and can make our own decisions, we would love to visit you in Switzerland if you would want to see us. We love you, Grandma, and we hope you're living a beautiful life." The letter was signed by both twins and included drawings they'd made of me living happily among the Swiss mountains. I cried for 2 hours after reading those words, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming understanding that my decision to preserve my dignity had been absolutely correct, even though it meant physical separation from people I loved deeply. I wrote back immediately. "My precious grandchildren, your letter is the most beautiful gift I have received in years. I love you both with all my heart and always will, regardless of the distance between us. When you are adults and can make your own choices, the doors to my heart and my home will always be open for you. Until then, I want you to know that your grandmother is living a full, joyful life surrounded by beauty, peace, and genuine friendship. Keep the love you feel for me, but also learn from this painful experience that words have the power to build or destroy, and that all relationships must be based on mutual respect and appreciation, not one-sided sacrifice." Today, 3 years after that terrible birthday that changed my life forever, I'm sitting on my apartment balcony in Zurich, watching the sun set over the mountains as I finish telling you this story, driver. I'm 75 years old with assets worth more than $600,000, a best-selling book that's helped thousands of women, dear friends from around the world, and an inner peace I never believed I would experience again. Emma asked me as a birthday gift to disappear from her life. I granted her that wish in the most spectacular and transformative way possible. What she never calculated was that by losing me, she didn't just lose a mother who loved her unconditionally. She lost the person who had kept her entire financial world stable and comfortable for decades. My disappearance was indeed my gift to her, forcing her to finally grow up and take responsibility for her own life. My new life was my gift to myself, the reward for finally having the courage to value my own well-being above someone else's selfish demands. And you know what, driver? It was worth every tear I shed, every moment of pain I endured, every sacrifice that brought me to this point. Because sometimes the only way to save yourself is to have the courage to lose everything familiar in order to discover who you were always meant to be. The woman who walked into Emma's house that day with a birthday cake was someone who had completely lost herself in service to others. The woman sitting here in Switzerland today is someone who finally found herself by choosing to put her own happiness first. That transformation, that journey from doormat to dignified independence, was the real gift, not just to me, but to every woman who reads my story and finds the courage to demand better treatment from the people who claim to love her. So that's my story, driver. Sometimes the people who say they love you are actually the ones keeping you from becoming who you're meant to be. And sometimes you have to be willing to lose them completely to save yourself. I hope you never find yourself in a situation like mine, but if you do, I hope you remember that you always have the choice to choose yourself, no matter how old you are or how complicated the family dynamics might be. Thank you for listening to all of this. It feels good to tell someone the whole truth about what happened to me and how I found my way to this new life. You're a good listener, and I can tell you've probably heard a lot of stories driving people around this city. But I bet you've never heard one quite like this one, have you?